On a sweltering August evening in 1997, Texas State Senator Elijah Cross stepped out of a courthouse in downtown Austin. He wasn't supposed to be there, at least not without security. Hours earlier, he had been secretly handed an envelope said to contain irrefutable evidence tying him to the murder of a local journalist. Witnesses later swore they saw the outline of the packet in his jacket pocket. He walked out into the heat and was never seen again. The official story was that Cross fled, that he slipped into the night, taking the evidence with him. But those who knew him claimed he wasn't the kind of man who ran. He was the kind of man who silenced others. And if the contents of that envelope were as damning as people claimed, someone else may have decided he wouldn't make it past the courthouse steps. For weeks, search teams combed through every highway, motel, and back road between Austin and the Mexican border. Not a single trace. No body, no clothing, no sign of a struggle. Only his black Lincoln Town car, found abandoned under an overpass, keys still in the ignition, driver's door wide open. The last person to see him alive, a courthouse janitor, swore he overheard Cross on the phone saying, "It's over. I have what I need." But if he was planning to use that evidence, why walk into the open without security? And who knew exactly where he'd be that night? In the years that followed, rumors grew wilder. Some said Cross escaped with the help of powerful friends. Others believed he was killed within minutes of leaving the courthouse. The envelope burned before sunrise. But one fact remains. The man and the proof that could have destroyed him vanished together into the Texas night. Texas has always been a land of wide horizons and deeper shadows, where justice can be swift or vanish entirely. Elijah Cross wasn't just any politician. He was a man who built his career on power plays, backroom deals, and an iron grip over his district. For decades, whispers followed him, whispers of bribes, disappearances, and bodies buried where no one dared to dig. But nothing stuck. Until that night in August 1997, the envelope he carried was supposed to be his undoing. Photographs, sworn statements, and bank records linking him to the murder of investigative journalist Daniel Weaver. A man who had, until his final day, been working to bring Cross down. That packet of evidence could have ended a career and started a prison sentence. Instead, it disappeared along with him. The case became an obsession for Texas law enforcement. Detectives tore apart his financial records, interviewed every aide, searched every property he owned. Still, no trace. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed him. His family called it a kidnapping. His rivals called it justice. His allies called it a smear campaign. But the deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. Some witnesses claim to have seen him days later, miles away. Others swear they saw his body pulled from the Colorado River, only for it to vanish from the coroner's report. Before we go further, make sure to subscribe to never miss stories where truth hides in the shadows. Like this video, if vanishing without a trace sends chills down your spine. Comment your city and country below so we know how far stories like this reach and how close they might be to you, because tonight we're going to follow Elijah Cross's final steps and see how a man can disappear while the whole world is watching. Chapter 1. The Envelope. It was 6:47 p.m. when Elijah Cross stepped out of the marbled corridor of the Travis County Courthouse and into the heavy Texas dusk. He had stayed late under the pretense of reviewing zoning legislation, but the truth was simpler. A meeting, unrecorded, off the books, in a judge's private chamber. The kind of meeting where careers ended and lives changed. When he emerged, his gait was measured, but his eyes flicked from shadow to shadow. Under his arm was a leather folio, but tucked inside his suit jacket against his ribs was the real prize, a manila envelope, thick and stiff, edges worn from too many hands. Inside, according to his source, was evidence that could link him to Weaver's murder, evidence he intended to control before it controlled him. Cross wasn't a man easily rattled. He'd faced indictments, protests, even assassination attempts. But the tension in his jaw that night was different. He adjusted his tie twice before reaching the courthouse steps, scanning the thinning crowd as though expecting someone who wasn't there. On the corner, leaning against a black sedan, a man in a pale hat gave him a single nod. Cross returned it with the faintest movement of his chin. No words exchanged, but the message was clear. The next step was ready. The plan was in motion. The air smelled of asphalt and rain, though the sky was clear. Somewhere down the block a payphone rang. It kept ringing. Cross's driver should have been there, but the curb was empty. He hesitated, the envelope pressing against his chest like a heartbeat. He took a slow breath and began walking toward the parking structure. His shoes clicked against the concrete, echoing in the evening quiet. Halfway there, he heard footsteps behind him. Too light to be a man's stride, too steady to be random. He didn't turn. Not yet. In the shadows between two lampposts, a woman in a dark blazer emerged. She kept pace with him, but stayed 3 steps behind. "Senator," she said softly. Her voice carried no emotion, but her hand brushed the side of her jacket in a way that suggested a weapon. "We should talk." Cross didn't break stride. "Not here." "Then where?" she asked. He gave no answer, only tightened his grip on the envelope through the fabric of his coat. He had rehearsed this moment for weeks, but now every exit seemed narrower, every option more dangerous. By the time he reached the first level of the parking garage, his sedan was there. Door unlocked, engine cold. On the driver's seat lay a single playing card, the Queen of Spades. He stood there frozen, the envelope still warm from his body heat. This wasn't part of the plan. It was a message, and he understood exactly who had sent it. The woman from the sidewalk was gone. The footsteps behind him had stopped, and somewhere in the echoing distance of the garage, a single car door slammed. Cross slid into the driver's seat, the envelope still in his pocket, and whispered to himself, too late to turn back now. It would be the last time anyone heard his voice. Chapter 2. The Last Sightings. The black Lincoln rolled out of the parking garage at 7:12 p.m., captured by a single grainy security camera. It was the last official record of Elijah Cross alive. The footage showed him gripping the steering wheel tightly, eyes flicking to the rear-view mirror twice in less than 5 seconds. Behind him, a set of headlights followed at a steady distance. Too far to be casual, too close to be coincidence. At the intersection of Congress Avenue, he stopped for a red light. A street vendor selling roses approached the driver's side, offering a single white bloom. Cross waved him away without rolling down the window, but the man lingered. Later, that vendor would swear he saw the outline of a thick envelope in Cross's jacket. It was bulging out, he told police, like he wanted someone to see it. When the light turned green, Cross didn't take the route toward his gated neighborhood. Instead, he veered south, toward the river. Those who knew him said he never drove without his driver at night, and never without a destination. That detour was the first sign something was wrong, or that he was meeting someone who wasn't supposed to exist. A local bartender named Patrick Reeves claimed he saw Cross's Lincoln pull into the lot of a riverside bar called the Iron Bridge. He didn't come inside. He just sat there in the dark, engine off, for almost 20 minutes. Then another car, an unmarked blue Ford, pulled in beside him. The 2 vehicles idled, no one getting out. Reeves went out for a smoke. The moment he stepped into the parking lot, both cars' headlights cut out. The silence was thick, unnatural. He turned to go back inside, and when he looked again, both vehicles were gone. Police later tracked a possible sighting on Route 183. A Lincoln matching Cross's was seen pulling into an abandoned truck stop. The witness, a trucker refueling nearby, claimed a man in a light suit got out, speaking briefly to someone in a cowboy hat, before both walked out of sight behind the building. When investigators searched that truck stop days later, they found nothing except a broken payphone and a single Queen of Spades card pinned under a rock. To this day, no one knows if it was planted as a taunt or if it had been there for years, but it matched the card left in his car earlier that night. Back in Austin at 8:03 p.m., A courthouse janitor clocked in for his night shift. In the empty hallway outside Judge Hanley's chambers, he found a small leather folio, the one Cross had been carrying earlier. Inside, blank paper, no envelope, no evidence, just weightless pages, as if mocking the idea that the truth had ever been there. By the time the Lincoln was found abandoned under the I-35 overpass the next morning, the trail was already cold. Keys in the ignition, driver's door open, no blood, no signs of a struggle. Just the lingering smell of cigarette smoke and the faintest trace of cheap cologne. The official report lists this night as the beginning of disappearance. But to the few who had been watching closely, the ones who understood the weight of that envelope, this was the end of something else entirely. Not just Elijah Cross's career, but the last thin line between what could be proved and what would be buried forever. Chapter 3. Ghost in the Desert. Within 24 hours of Elijah Cross's disappearance, Austin was flooded with conflicting stories. The official police statement said they were following all leads, but in reality, most leads contradicted each other. The chaos wasn't accidental. In high-profile cases like this, misinformation spread like wildfire, and every new rumor seemed to erase what little truth existed. The first strange report came from a gas station attendant in Del Valle, 12 miles east of the city. He claimed Cross had stopped there the morning after he vanished, buying water and a pack of cigarettes. He was alone, the attendant said, but he kept looking over his shoulder, like someone was following him. Police questioned him twice. After the second interview, he stopped talking to reporters. Then came the sighting from Laredo, 3 days later. A motel clerk swore Cross checked in under a false name, Jay Weaver, an eerie choice, given it was the surname of the journalist he was accused of killing. According to the clerk, Cross stayed only a few hours before leaving in the middle of the night, taking nothing but a small paper bag. Not all reports placed him alive. A fisherman on the Colorado River claimed he saw a man in a suit floating face down near the shoreline at dawn. Before he could pull the body in, 2 men in dark jackets arrived in a speedboat, lifted it aboard, and disappeared upriver. No official record of this retrieval exists, and the fisherman's statement was never added to the public file. Perhaps the most unsettling detail came from inside the Austin Police Department itself. An evidence clerk admitted, off the record, that the original security footage from the courthouse garage, the one showing Cross leaving in the Lincoln, had been replaced with a shortened version. The last 5 minutes were gone. Detective Harold Keene, one of the few on the case who hadn't worked directly with Cross in his political career, began keeping his own notes in a separate, unmarked binder. In them, he recorded a conversation overheard between 2 state officials. "We'll give them a ghost. Ghosts can't testify." The implication was clear. Someone wanted Cross gone, but not confirmed dead. Rumors spread in political circles that Cross had made a deal, disappear quietly, and the evidence would disappear too. It was a theory that explained the blank folio found in the courthouse, but it didn't explain the sightings, or the Queen of Spades cards, or why multiple people close to him had also started vanishing. One of those was Janet Holt, his former campaign aide. She'd been subpoenaed to testify before a grand jury about the Weaver case. 2 weeks after Cross's disappearance, she missed her deposition. Her apartment was found unlocked, her phone on the kitchen counter. On the table was a single playing card, the Queen of Spades. By this point, the Queen had become an unofficial signature in the investigation. Some believed it was Cross himself leaving a trail. Others thought it was the work of whoever silenced him, mocking the hunt. Either way, every time a card appeared, another witness seemed to vanish. The deeper Detective Keene dug, the more he realized the case wasn't about one man disappearing. It was about erasing an entire chain of evidence, witness by witness, card by card. And if the whispers were true, the next disappearance would be his. Chapter 4. The Cassette. The package arrived without a return address. A small padded envelope, postmarked from Houston, dated 3 days earlier. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was an old, Maxell audio cassette. No note, no explanation, just a single word written in black marker across the label, testify. Detective Harold Keene hadn't seen a cassette in years. He dug an old tape player out of the evidence room, wiped the dust from its surface, and pressed play. Static filled the room for the first 5 seconds, followed by 2 male voices. One was unmistakably Elijah Cross. "Don't hand it over until I say so." Cross's voice came through, low but steady. "If they see it, it's over for me, but if he sees it first, it's over for all of us." The second voice was harder to identify, older, with a rasp like a smoker's cough. "You think you can walk out with it? You're already dead, Elijah." A metallic clink echoed in the background, like coins on a table or a clasp being locked. Then Cross spoke again, softer this time. "If something happens, you know what to do with the Queen." The tape clicked, hissed, and went silent for several seconds before cutting off completely. Keene rewound it twice, each time catching new details. Faint footsteps, the sound of a door closing, a distant hum that could have been fluorescent lights, or the faint echo of an underground garage. His gut told him the conversation had taken place the same night Cross disappeared. He sent the tape to the department's audio lab for analysis. Hours later, the technician called him, voice tight. "This is clean, too clean. No background distortion except for the hum. It's almost like it was recorded in a controlled space, but with deliberate noise layered on top to make it seem casual." That same night, Keene's car alarm went off at 2:14 a.m. He rushed outside, service weapon drawn, but found nothing except a single Queen of Spades card wedged under his windshield wiper. On the back, in neat handwriting, "Don't rewind again." The message was clear. Someone knew he had the tape, and they were close enough to watch him. He considered turning it over to his superiors, but stopped himself. Every instinct screamed that someone inside the department was leaking information. If he surrendered it, the tape would vanish before sunrise. Instead, he made a copy, locking the original in a safe deposit box at a bank 2 towns over. The copy stayed with him, hidden under the floor mat of his kitchen. From that moment on, he moved like a man in enemy territory, checking mirrors, avoiding routines, sleeping with his phone in a Faraday bag. Listening to the tape became an obsession. Each playback pulled him deeper into the shadow network Cross had lived in, the unspoken alliances, the coded messages, the trail of queens. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Keene realized the awful truth. The tape wasn't just a clue, it was bait, and he had already taken it. Chapter 5. The Warehouse. The hum on the cassette haunted Keene for days. He played it over and over until he finally recognized the pitch. Not electrical, but mechanical. It matched the low, rhythmic vibration of industrial refrigeration units. That narrowed it down to a handful of facilities on the outskirts of Austin. Only one of them had ties to Elijah Cross's campaign donors, a shuttered produce distribution warehouse on the east side. It had been closed for over a decade, its corrugated metal walls streaked with rust, weeds clawing through the cracked asphalt lot. The city records listed the property under a shell company registered in Nevada. Dig deeper, and the trail led straight to a political action committee that had bankrolled Cross for years. Keene arrived after midnight, keeping his headlights off until the last moment. The chain-link gate hung open, its padlock snapped. No fresh tire tracks, but the dust inside had been disturbed recently. His instincts told him he wasn't the first to come here looking for answers. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with the faint metallic bite of old blood. The refrigeration units were still there, silent now, but when he pressed his ear to one, he could hear the faint hum that matched the cassette. This was the room where that conversation had been recorded. Near the back, half hidden under a tarp, he found a folding table and 2 metal chairs. One was overturned, its legs bent. On the table sat a glass ashtray with a single cigarette butt, lipstick smudged on the filter. Beside it, a dried smear the color of rust, and a playing card, the Queen of Spades, weighted down by a paperclip. The card held a folded receipt from a gas station outside Laredo, time-stamped 3 days after Cross's disappearance. On the back, in hurried block letters, someone had scrawled, "They know you have it." The message wasn't addressed to Cross. It was addressed to whoever came next. Now, that was Keene. He swept the rest of the warehouse, finding nothing else but signs that people had been there recently. Footprints in the dust, a faint coffee stain still wet, and the smell of cheap cologne, the same scent reported in Cross's abandoned Lincoln. As he turned to leave, a sound froze him in place, the slow creak of the main door closing. His flashlight beam caught a shadow sliding along the wall. Then a voice, low, familiar, and close. "Detective Keene, you shouldn't be here." The figure stepped into the dim light. It was the woman from the courthouse sidewalk, the one who had followed Cross the night he vanished. She wore the same dark blazer, her hair tied back, her eyes unblinking. In her right hand something glinted, not a weapon, but another cassette tape. She set it on the table right beside the Queen of Spades. "Play this," she said, "and you'll understand why he's gone." Then, without another word, she walked past him and into the night, disappearing before Keene could even move. The detective stood there in the silent hum of the empty warehouse, staring at the tape, knowing it could be the key, or the trap that would end him. Chapter 6. The second tape. Keene waited until he was back in his apartment before playing the second cassette. He closed every curtain, checked every lock twice, and set his phone in the freezer, a crude but effective way to block its signal. When the tape rolled, there was no static, no background noise, just a deep inhale, followed by Elijah Cross's voice. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone." His tone wasn't fearful. It was resigned, almost cold. "You're not a cop who stumbled into this. You're here because they want you here, and if you're smart, you'll burn this tape before you even finish it." He paused, and Keene could hear the faint scratch of a pen on paper. "There are 3 queens," Cross continued. "You've already seen 2. The third will find you when it's time to finish this. But understand, the cards aren't warnings. They're invitations." The voice grew quieter, as if Cross had leaned closer to the microphone. "The man who took Weaver wasn't alone. He works for someone you've never heard of. Someone who has sat in the same room as governors, CEOs and generals without a single camera noticing. They own the police, they own the courts, and they own me." Keene froze as Cross's next words cut through the dark. "Detective Harold Keene, you are not outside this. You've been in their plan since before you knew this case existed. Every choice you've made was one they counted on, including finding this tape." A chair scraped against the floor in the background, followed by another voice, low, sharp, female. "That's enough." The sound of a click, like a recorder stopping, echoed. Then the tape went silent for a full 15 seconds before starting again. But this time, it wasn't Cross speaking. It was the woman from the warehouse. "He didn't understand that this isn't about him," she said. "It's about what comes after. You want to know the truth? Follow the third queen. But you won't like where it leads." Her voice was calm, deliberate and dripping with certainty. The tape ended abruptly, the player clicking back to standby. Keene sat there in the dark, heart pounding. Cross had known his name before they'd ever met. That meant someone had been feeding information about the investigation, and not just recently. This had been in motion long before the night of the disappearance. Keene rewound the section with the female voice 3 times, picking out subtle background noises. A train horn, distant and echoing, the rhythmic clank of metal against metal, and something softer, the faint notes of a church bell. He didn't know the location yet, but it was a start. When he finally shut off the recorder, there was a single envelope slipped under his apartment door. Inside was a Queen of Spades, the third card. Written across its face, in the same block letters as before, were just 4 words: "Now it's your turn." Chapter 7. The Station. The church bell was the key. Keene spent 2 days combing through records of decommissioned stations within 100 miles of Austin. Only one matched the audio clues from the second tape, an old freight terminal in Lockhart, shuttered since the early 80s. It sat beside an abandoned spur line with a small brick chapel just 50 yards away. He arrived before dawn, keeping his car parked 3 blocks out. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time, rusted rails cutting through knee-high weeds, broken windows staring like dead eyes. The wind carried the faint smell of oil and dust, the scent of things left behind for decades. The chapel bell was silent now, but its outline was unmistakable in the half-light. Keane stepped inside the terminal, flashlight beams sweeping across graffiti-covered walls and collapsed wooden crates. The air was cool, heavy, and too still for a place supposedly empty. Near the far end, he found a small office with a warped metal desk. On it lay a battered black ledger, its pages filled with names and dates. Some entries were crossed out in thick red ink. Near the bottom of the last page, his own name appeared, dated 3 days earlier. Next to it, a single queen of spades taped to the paper. The floor creaked behind him. Keane spun around, weapon drawn. A man stood in the doorway, tall, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, his face obscured by shadow. "You came alone," the stranger said, voice flat. "Good. They hate when it's easy." Keane demanded a name, but the man only smirked. "Names don't matter here. Only lists." He gestured toward the ledger. "You think you're investigating a disappearance. You're not. You're standing in the middle of a recruitment drive, and they already decided you're in." Before Keane could respond, the faint sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere deeper in the station, heavier, multiple sets closing in. The man in the cap stepped back into the shadows. "Looks like you're welcoming committees here," he said, and then he was gone, swallowed by the dark. Keane moved fast, tucking the ledger under his arm. As the footsteps grew louder, he ducked into a maintenance corridor that ran along the platform. The smell of cigarette smoke hit him, the same brand from Cross's Lincoln. He quickened his pace, but the corridor dead-ended in a locked steel door. The footsteps stopped. A shadow stretched across the floor as someone stepped into the dim light from a cracked skylight. Then, a voice, low, female, unmistakable. "You were told to follow the third queen. Congratulations, detective. You found her." It was the woman from the tapes. She stepped closer, her eyes cold. "Now we see if you survived the initiation." Behind her, 2 more figures emerged from the shadows. One of them held a canvas bag that looked heavy and big enough to carry the kind of evidence people kill for. Chapter 8. The Initiation. The woman in the dark blazer slid the heavy canvas bag onto the floor between them. The thud it made was dull, organic. Keane's instincts screamed that whatever was inside wasn't just evidence, it was leverage. She crouched beside it, unzipping halfway to reveal what looked like a stack of file folders bound together with twine. On top lay a queen of spades, stained with something dark. "This," she said, tapping the top folder, "is every thread connecting Cross to the man who ordered Weaver's death. If you keep it, you'll carry it for the rest of your life. If you destroy it, you walk out of here untouched." That's the initiation. Keane's mind raced. Destroying it meant burying the truth, but keeping it meant he'd be hunted like Cross. He asked her why he was chosen. She smiled faintly. "Because you're predictable. You hate corruption more than you fear dying. That makes you useful, until it makes you dangerous." 2 men flanked him now, both wearing plain work jackets, their faces partially shadowed. One held a lighter, the other a jerry can that smelled sharply of gasoline. They didn't need to say what would happen if he refused either option. The air was thick with the chemical scent, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Cross had the same choice," she continued. "He thought he could outplay us, thought he could keep the files and stay alive. Now he's a ghost. You want to join him?" Her tone was almost conversational, as if they were discussing the weather instead of life and death. Keane knelt beside the bag, his fingers brushing the top folder. It was warm, as if it had been sitting near a heat source moments ago. Inside, he glimpsed photographs, grainy surveillance shots of politicians in dim hotel rooms, briefcases exchanged in parking garages, faces he recognized from television and courtrooms. Each page felt like a loaded weapon. The man with the lighter flicked it once, the flame casting long shadows against the cracked brick wall. The gasoline fumes grew stronger. Keen's thoughts narrowed to a single question. Was survival worth becoming part of the machine he'd spent his life fighting? He closed the bag, zipped it tight, and stood. "If I take it," he said, "I'm not working for you. I'm working against them." The woman tilted her head, almost amused. "Then you've already failed the test." Before he could react, one of the men grabbed the bag from his hands, tossing it toward the flame. The twine caught first, then the edges of the folders. Keen lunged forward, yanking a single page free before the rest went up in a whoosh of fire and black smoke. The woman stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "You just made yourself a problem, detective." Then she turned and walked away into the shadows, leaving him in the flickering light of the burning files, clutching the single page, a page that bore Elijah Cross's handwriting and a name Keen had never heard before, until now. Chapter 9. The Dead Man's Name. The page was brittle, edges singed from the fire. In the center, written in sharp, deliberate handwriting, was a single name, Victor Hale. Beneath it, in smaller print, a date, June 14th, 2003, and the word obituary. Keen recognized the name faintly. It tugged at a memory from years ago, back when he was still a rookie. A quick search on his offline laptop confirmed it. Victor Hale had been declared dead in 2003 after a boating accident on Lake Buchanan. His body was never recovered. At the time, Hale had been a mid-level political consultant with rumored ties to offshore accounts and blackmail operations. The obituary had been brief, almost clinical, with no mention of surviving family. What caught Keen's attention was what came after Hale's death. Over the next year, several high-profile investigations in Texas had collapsed abruptly, witnesses retracting statements or vanishing entirely. The pattern was invisible to most, but not to a detective used to spotting shadows where others saw nothing. He dug deeper, pulling old property records and campaign finance filings. A cluster of LLCs emerged, all registered to shell companies. The addresses were spread across Texas, Nevada, and Belize, but one of them stood out. A ranch outside Llano, still paying utilities every month, in the name of a trust linked to Victor Hale's former law partner. Keen drove there under the cover of night. The ranch was vast, its perimeter fenced with barbed wire. A single light burned in the main house, but what drew his attention was the barn, its doors slightly ajar, a faint mechanical hum coming from inside. Inside the barn, the air was cool and smelled faintly of motor oil. At the far end, under a hanging work lamp, sat a long wooden table stacked with manila folders, identical to the ones he had seen in the warehouse. On top was a photograph of Elijah Cross, dated just a week before his disappearance. Footsteps crunched behind him. Keen turned slowly to see a man leaning on a cane, his face lined but his eyes sharp, the kind of sharpness that comes from watching people die and learning from it. "You've been busy, detective," the man said, his voice steady, "but you've also been sloppy." Keen's throat tightened. "Victor Hale?" he asked. The man smiled faintly. "I'm supposed to be dead. It's convenient. No taxes, no reporters, no accountability. You should try it sometime." Hale stepped closer, his cane tapping against the concrete floor. "Cross thought he could expose me. That's why he's gone. And now you've picked up his torch, which means you've just inherited his enemies." His tone wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. Before Keen could reply, Hale gestured toward the table. "Take whatever you want. It won't save you. By the time you decide who to trust, they'll already have decided what to do with you." Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness outside the barn, leaving Keen alone with a stack of evidence and the chilling certainty that every move from now on was already being anticipated by someone who had been playing this game for decades. Chapter 10. The last mile. Keen stuffed as many folders as he could into his duffel bag. The weight was nothing compared to the heaviness in his chest. Every instinct told him he had minutes, maybe seconds, before someone came back. The barn was too quiet, the air too still. Outside, the moon lit the ranch like a stage, and he felt every shadow watching. He made it to his car without incident, but the moment his headlights cut through the dirt road, he saw them, 2 sets of taillights in his rearview mirror. No high beams, no aggressive approach, just the steady, suffocating certainty of being followed. Keane didn't drive home. Instead, he took back roads, doubling back twice, trying to lose them. But every time he turned, the taillights reappeared, patient as vultures. Whoever they were, they weren't in a rush. They wanted him to know they could end this whenever they chose. He headed toward the only place he thought might buy him time, an abandoned radio station on the outskirts of Austin. The building had been dead for years, but the broadcasting room was shielded, built to keep out interference. If he could transmit the files digitally from there, someone might see them before he disappeared like Cross. Inside, the station was a tomb. Dust-coated consoles, empty coffee cups fossilized on desks. Keane spread the files on a long table, snapping quick photos with a burner phone. Names, bank accounts, offshore transfers, enough to scorch half the political elite in Texas. His hands shook as he hit send to a secure Dropbox. The signal bar on the phone blinked, then died. Every light in the station cut out, plunging him into black. A door creaked open somewhere down the hall. Footsteps, slow, purposeful. The air seemed to thicken with each step. "You had a choice, detective," a voice said. Victor Hales, calm as ever. "But you've always been the kind of man who chooses the losing side." Keane backed toward the broadcasting console, fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. The old station's emergency power switch. He yanked it, and for a split second the room lit up red from the backup generator. In that flash, he saw them, 3 figures in the doorway, one holding a pistol, another carrying a canvas bag, just like the one that had burned. He didn't wait. Keane dove for the back exit, sprinting into the open field behind the station. Gunshots cracked the air, dirt exploding around his feet. He kept running until the sound of the shots faded, but the silence that followed was worse. By dawn, the radio station was nothing but ashes. The files, the photos, the duffel bag, all gone. The only trace of Keane was a queen of spades pinned to the station's chain-link fence, the words "Game Over" written in black ink. Whether he was dead, captured, or had simply vanished like Elijah Cross, no one could say. But the names he tried to expose, they were still in power, and the game went on. Some say Detective Harold Keane died that night, buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in the Texas desert. Others whisper that he's still out there, moving through bus stations, cheap motels, and diners at the edge of nowhere, carrying a single burned page with a name no one dares speak aloud. The truth? It's harder to kill than a man. It's an infection. It moves from one host to another, surviving every attempt to silence it. Victor Hale is proof of that. Elijah Cross was proof of that. And now Keane, whether alive or dead, is just another chapter in a story that will keep being written as long as power hides in the shadows. So the next time a public figure disappears quietly from the headlines, the next time a trial ends abruptly, or a scandal evaporates overnight, remember this: somewhere a queen of spades is being placed on a table, and when it's turned over, someone's fate is sealed. The only question is, will it be theirs or yours?